What do a speaking coach, a strategy consultant, and a designer have in common? Sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But honestly, it's all about finding out what people really do in their jobs. The stories, the struggles, the coffee breaks. The real stuff you won't get in a job title.
Welcome to a space where we sit down with people from all kinds of careers, have a laugh, and dive into what makes their work meaningful. Whether you're looking to learn something new or just here for a good story, let us be your guide. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get
Casually Pro.
Bro! Yeah!
Awesome. Okay, so today we have a really cool guest with us. Gurjinder, I am really excited to talk to you because you have two things that I find fascinating that I don't really get to talk about a lot, and those are design and movies. So could you tell us what you do and why it's so cool?
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you guys. And as soon as this started, you dialed it up to like 11. So I know that I have to do the same thing. We're performers. We're performing right now. So hello everyone listening to this. My name is Gurjinder. Nice to meet you all as well. Thank you for letting me sort of into your ears. I run a design studio. It's kind of a solo design firm based in New York. And I primarily work with early stage startups to help them with creating go-to-market ready branding that's going to get them ready for launch and help them dominate the competition from day one. That's sort of my one sentence pitch of what I do and how I create and who I create for. But really it's, at the core of it, like you said, it's design. And we're going to talk about that other angle of the movie side. But yeah, let's walk into it. I'm really excited for the conversation.
Cool. So, I think there's something really special about combining something that you love and your job, right? When you're
Right.
talking about something that's free form, like design or just art in general, I always find it really difficult to kind of match that to a strategy or even just kind of like a direct business relation, right? So could you kind of talk us through what it's like being a designer and having your own firm and maybe like an example of a project that you worked on that you're really proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. I've gotten the experience of both working in-house and now on the agency side. I started my career as in-house, and I started it working as an intern at a startup, and that was during my college years. I stayed with that for about 3 years, and then it turned into sort of a full-time thing until sadly that startup had to wind down operations, which is a
Mm.
larger story in itself. But now on the agency side, the biggest twist that I've seen is that on the agency side, you get to learn really quickly. And you get to
Mm.
work with clients in such a way that wouldn't be possible in-house. Because in-house, you're sort of, working through the relationships of the same team in general, and you're working on sort of the same project all year round. And that for me was about, working on the same project what it felt like for 3 years. But working now on the agency side, you get to work on a new project every single month. And that in itself is probably the ultimate learning experience that you can ask for, is being challenged month after month at a consistent frequent basis with a completely new context and a new group of clients, because it's usually more than one person on that team, and navigating that relationship with them on the agency side, that I think holds a lot of fun and merit, that any designer would want to say that if I want to learn quickly, I'm going to go on the agency side first. And then maybe in-house makes a return for me in my career at a later stage. But for now, what I wanted to do, it was, the job market was a difficult thing since 2022. That was when I was kind of laid off from that original startup. And then I had to sort of fend for myself and figure out, okay, I chose to study design. It's nothing like engineering. It's nothing like, being a lawyer or a doctor, where it's sort of like a traditional type of career that has a lot of safety net to it. Designers, there's so many to go around. Um, so I really had to figure out, okay, I'm gonna sit down and kind of launch my own little thing, whether it's a LLC, whether it's a S corp, whether it's like a one person thing and just under my own name. I didn't know, but I slowly figured that out as more and more information came up to me. And the name of my firm is Gesso, and that is also a larger story we'll get into. But going with a name and kind of sort of like a studio in itself and giving that a corporation title meant that I was serious about building this as like sort of a future asset, as a future business, not just a one person freelance shop, but I do want to grow this into one of the best branding agencies and design firms in the world in the next, 10 years total.
Yes, that's a great vision. Yay. Wow. That sounds very exciting. And how you say that you have a new project every month, that must be very nice because when you work for too long on a certain project, at some point it can become boring. And when you do something like this, you ensure that you never get bored. But still, what's difficult in this situation is that when you work inside a company, you can do design and only design. And
Yeah.
everything else that is related to client acquisition is done by other people. When you run your own agency, you have to find your customers. Can you tell us more how you did the transition into this new role?
I love that you asked me this, Jeffrey, after my answer, because I looked back at my answer just a few seconds ago and I realized I didn't even touch on client acquisition. I didn't even touch on marketing. Why is that? Because I'm such a designer focused person that if you were to allow me to just work on projects without worrying about lead generation, client acquisition, of course, I just work on projects. That's like literally the first priority on my mind is to really do an incredible job. But for a creative freelancer and a creative consultant like me, the mind shift I had to bring in was that I can't just sit around hoping and praying for clients to come in, at least not after, doing a lot of relationship building within the industry and more things like that. It has to be a consistent effort. And I'm responsible for that because I'm responsible for how much revenue I bring in every month. And if I'm not doing the marketing duties enough, then really no money is going to come in. And I've had months like that just this year alone. So that's been a perspective shift that I've had to do quite a lot of things. I've had to hire and join two different coaching programs throughout these past few years. I've had to watch, nonstop YouTube videos, getting sort of advice, getting tips, getting strategies on all the social medias, on all kinds of email marketing, and just, building up more and more groundwork sort of in the marketing discipline. Now, also, I have I've majored in marketing in college, right? I spent 4 years
Oh,
studying this, and
that
yet going
helps.
that helps. Yes, definitely. Because the whole brand focus, the whole side of where I get to help other clients, that's where I feel like I really bring in all that marketing. But when I have to
Mhm.
do it for myself, I feels like I didn't learn anything during those 4 years. Um, because
Oh,
oh
oh
yeah,
yeah. So you
yeah.
can help other people with the knowledge that you learned at school studying marketing, but applying for yourself, is it different or is there another reason why you cannot do it?
I think it's difficult for two reasons. Number one, my sort of major and the track that I took was very less focused on analytics. It was a lot more of advertising and marketing communications. So it was very communications based, thinking about things like brand positioning, thinking about thematics, thinking about sort of storytelling and copywriting, very less on sort of the tactical side of marketing that is a little more analytics focused. How do I use Google Analytics? How do I use meta ads in a, in the best way possible? Things like that weren't taught inherently at school. And even the lessons that were a little more like SEO focused, they just flew over my head because I'm not that type of person. I'm a very creative type of person. I focus more on, again, sort of the client focused work. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, I think, is uh, doing it as a solopreneur and as a solo founder. I can come up with one paragraph that is like, the best written paragraph that I've ever created about my agency. And I can show it to someone who's maybe like a prospect and they won't understand 80% of it.
Mhm.
So I think it's that the feedback loop is another issue. It's that I'm doing this sort of in a silo with myself, which is why I feel like coaches were such an important piece of the puzzle that have helped bring me back on track to actually work on my firm in a much more accountable format.
Mm. So when you're looking at kind of the growth and acquisition part of your firm, right? The more technical business part, are you trying to expand on your natural talents, or are you actively trying to build skills that kind of run counterintuitive to the creative thought? I think you were actually the one who recommended a great book by the name of it's like the artist manifesto for winning without a pitch.
Yeah,
Uh,
the win
and
without pitching
yeah, win
manifesto.
without pitching. Um, and there's so many things that I think creative people have kind of a leg up in terms of inspiring people and getting people to feel things about their work. But when it comes to technical aspect, I feel like it's an entirely different world, an entirely different set of skills. And I'm wondering, how are you approaching building those internally? Because yeah, I think a coach is a great like third party means for creating those skills or introducing you to those skills, but you yourself have to develop and work at them. So I'm just curious to see what you're doing and how that's affecting you and your business.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I like being in the startup field, and I always look at most startup founders are like engineers, most likely. They come from an engineering background. All the top CEOs of, the fangs of, America are, have engineering backgrounds and they sort of rose their ranks. And I always wondered, like, why is that? And you compare that to someone like Airbnb CEO who comes from a more design focused background, which is nice to see that. So I think this is why I compare engineers and designers, is because I feel we both are two positions and two roles that create things from 0 to 1. So there's
Mm,
an idea out there that our team came together. Yes, this is what we want created, and we're actually the ones able to create them. And oftentimes we work in tandem, whether it's on the product, a design side, or sort of just in general on a front end website. We get to work together in those areas, but we both do this 0 to 1 aspect. But why are engineers much more successful as reaching that level of something like a business leader, whereas you don't hear that much about designers? I think engineers have much more of an analytical mindset. Their left
mm,
brain is much stronger than their right brain. And for designers, the right brain is much stronger than the left brain. But the thing is, without you leveraging both parts and you leveraging only the right side, I think puts you in a bigger predicament than just being, I think, a left only type of thinker. Because you can bring a lot of intelligence to these conversations. You have, the work to back it all up. As an engineer, your talents are pretty clear, your value is pretty clear. On the design side, the value always have to be conveyed on a resume
mm.
or during an interview. People always say you have to show your business impact as a designer. Well, something like brand is, if I'm a brand focused designer, that business impact is very much long term.
Mm,
So, so there's a lot of questions like that that I've had to answer for myself because they've come up in these conversations where I've tried to get on a sales call and people start asking me, why are you charging what you charge when I can get what you're doing for cheaper elsewhere? Right? That's always a question. So things like that, I've had to figure out answers to, and it's forced me to think of the business side in addition to the design side. Like if I say that the design side is my hard skill, it's my talent, it's my craft, then the soft skill has to be things like networking. It has to be things like understanding your own business impact to the rest of the team and the rest of the big picture. And without those answers in place or having, a few metrics to say, here's the metrics that I'm most helpful for that I've seen historically, I've done really well and helped my clients in. Without some of that information, uh, you really have no chance to charge what you want to and, make a killer living. And it's forced me, right? I think the answer to your question is it's a force of nature that I've had to start thinking more on the business side, more analytical,
mm.
being more reasonable, being more metrics driven, caring about the numbers and not letting them sort of fly over my head anymore. And that's been a big perspective change in the past few years. And if I look back to where I started, I'm a very different person because of it.
Well, you know what? It's really interesting that you're mentioning left and right brain and this idea of creative and analytical because Jeff and I both come from very analytical backgrounds, and then we transitioned into well, I would consider much more creative, much more I wouldn't say completely creative, but certainly much less conservative kind of views on how to build things in terms of our current careers, right? I'm in consulting and he is a public speaking coach. And so for us, going into business ended up being a little easier, I would imagine, in comparison. But when you are developing that analytical side of your brain and actually even more about the actual methodology of how you assign value to your creative process, can you talk to us about some of the analytics that you're looking at, some of the this is why I'm worth X amount using your work? Because I can justify what I do because I can see the numbers of revenue go up and down. But when you're talking about emotions, when you're talking about feelings and an artistic creation that really brings that to the forefront, I don't know how to value inspiration. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'd answer that in a few ways too, maybe one or two. First thing I want to say is I have chosen a set of metrics that I take a look at. And the way that I tell the story of, say, brand design is my number one primary focus, the number one thing I want to deliver. The number two thing is a website, is a
Mm,
completely new web design that is based off of that original package that we create together. So it's like month one is brand design, month two is usually web design. Web design is always a byproduct of sort of where we want to take the brand. And sort of, I like having that conversation first. Totally depends on the client though. But the way that I tell that story is I actually tell it um, with the website and the website metrics as an anchor, right? Because the
mm,
brand, whatever logo you're going to change and whatever new brand identity you're going to have, is not going to create the short-term results or the short-term impact. Maybe besides, the impressions, the engagements, and the excitement or the negativity that you create at launching that campaign. And if you put money into launching it at like a widespread way, like a brand like Jaguar recently did, right?
oh man.
Um, oh yeah. So that's a whole Pandora's box. But that's an example of, okay, a brand can show its impact in those social media metrics right away. Just
Mm,
like how when you launch a movie, how do you know if the movie's good or not? Well, you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, you look at the critic score, you look at what the box office numbers were like, and then you decide whether that piece of art actually is a solid product that people consumed or not, a product of entertainment media. In the same way, brand design, it's very hard to put a number on it. So that's why my angle and my anchor is the website. And on the
mm,
website, what I look for is I call it, 5 things. So, number one thing, your visitors are either going to understand what you're talking about right away or they're going to bounce. So if you
mm.
have a high bounce rate, even with a decent amount of traffic, and you might even be paying for that to bring that traffic in, you have a problem. High bounce rate. Another one is low
Okay.
conversion rate, right? Your buttons aren't converting. That's a problem. Low visitor time on page. So the time that people spend on your page scrolling through it is much less than a healthy average should be around 52 seconds. And if you have
Mm,
something that is much less than that, that means people just aren't either the wrong person is landing there, right? So you have to fix that, or they're just not caring enough. You're not telling enough of a story. Also, is like, click through rates on CTAs for your ads. So maybe your ads are the issue, or just high exit rates on more product focused pages. So if you have some sort of combination of all of those metrics that are off for you, that means you have what we call a positioning problem. And
mm,
what positioning is essentially is how well are you able to differentiate yourself in the market? How different of a spot do you take up in the mind of a user or a consumer that they're going to pick you or they're even going to consider you amongst sort of trying to solve a certain issue that they have, right? So these are the metrics that I grade your website on. And I'll ask you this during a sales call. Like, how are these metrics? And they'll usually go back and check them. And then maybe they'll text me, like, here's what they are. Or if they know them, I'll know them on the call and I'll tell them, you have a positioning problem. And the fact that you have that problem means that something is wrong in the storytelling overall, across your brand, across your website. So let's work on fixing your website and the copywriting here. So maybe that's like the very first thing. When we
mm.
sort of go through that process and give them a whole before and after version of the copywriting of that homepage, then they realize, this problem is bigger than I thought. Whatever you're saying here, now the brand, the way that it looks, it doesn't capture that idea well. So we have to start, then thinking about the brand as well. So that's how we get to take this angle of the website and fixing that and the story there and looping it back into the brand and sort of creating this cycle in a loop that helps us work on these very important assets in that stage, without maybe assigning a clear metric to the brand itself. The clear metric is the website. If your brand and website is well put together, everything is consistent, then that'll show up in the website results. And so that's really the way that I've brought it in and try to explain it on the metric side for my clients.
So when you measure those metrics, you assume that it's the right type of people who are indeed the customer target who go on the website. So I imagine you work with companies who are already clear on what are they customers.
Yes, absolutely, and that is why my target has been more Series A startups, considering that they're either just about to raise from a seed to a Series A in that transition period, or they've already raised and there's officially a Series A. What is the characteristic thing about a Series A? They have shown product market demand. They have shown that their product works and they know who they're going after. And it's just now an effort of scaling that and making that sort of a systematic process of growth where they're like, okay, if we put money into this campaign and we know who we're going after, we expect to see that ROI. So they have a pretty good idea of who they're going after. Through our conversations, sometimes we get even more clarity. So that's always helpful. I also like to ask them, do you have, any data that you can put in front of my desk? Any analytics data from the past year or so, past clients data? Can we see like patterns in like the types of users that have, bought your product? And can we develop patterns there and figure out, okay, is there a persona that we have to go after? But most of the time, yeah, Series A startups have a really good idea because investors have also bet on that idea that yes, this is the consumer, this is the product market fit. And so their next step is then to spruce up and fix the assets that, they didn't need to fix before, but now's the right time. Now's the right time to look like serious contender out on the market.
Yeah, I guess it makes a lot of sense that you have to have a good product that leads to good storytelling because otherwise, I mean, you can't polish a turd, right? There's only so much that you can do on the design side to make sure that something is selling when it's not a good product. But I guess with that kind of in mind, can you talk to us about your design firm and kind of maybe the services that you offer directly? If there's kind of something that you feel like you have a better specialty on, or something that differentiates you from any other design firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. The thing that I think separates me the most is creating a really bespoke brand identity. A lot of times, what happens is I see there's a lot of great templates out there, a lot of great website templates, a lot of great, pieces that you can buy into and say, yeah, like I'll create sort of like a whole identity piece and deliver that for the client. For me, I've always been a little more classical in the way that I go about things. I always believe that every client, every brand has sort of this perfect identity that they need to go after and that they need to look like eventually, and evolve into. And that's what I feel I help them create. I take a look at whatever existed before, even if it was like a cheap logo you bought from Fiverr, maybe 2 years ago, and now you're ready for that change. I'll look at that logo. I'll see, like, is there some kind of equity we can bring into this? And then I'll try to evolve it. Right. So it's like a Pokemon. I'll try to give it the most natural evolution possible into that next iteration. And you can expect sort of the Raichus and the Charizards of branding that I help you get to. Like I help you get to that next level thing, that next level moment that you want to be at to connect with your audience in a really deep way. And the best brand identities out there create this cohesive experience that no matter what touch point, big or small, whether it's if you buy a t-shirt, whether it's that little tag that's, right above behind your neck, or whether it's that little pin that you get when you sort of get as like a little marketing goodie when you're, at a networking event. Every single one of those things matters and each touch point matters. And what I have is I bring a level of care, a level of attention to details, to care about those little things, to make sure that then the big picture is speaking that story in the most justice and in the most impactful way possible. So my whole thing with branding, and if I could focus on one thing forever, it would be brand identity, is it's creating a logo and a whole brand kit and a brand package that feels like a perfect fit for you and your story. And it's as if your story is told accurately at every single touch point that you have out there.
That's incredible. I'm someone who really likes fashion, and I like wearing nice clothes, but I hate wearing branded clothing. The one exception that I have is this hat that I got for free from a GQ subscription that just has the little GQ on it. It's very innocuous, very, you wouldn't notice it unless you were upfront looking at me. But when I think about the kind of branding that GQ does and the kind of feelings and emotions that they evoke through having very simple styling, very simple things that allow other people to be the star of their kind of brand itself. It makes total sense when you're looking at a business and you're trying to understand, okay, well, how does the logo even matter outside of maybe conveying a point of what they do? There's much more to the story than just informational. And I think that it's really interesting that a lot of brand value gets segmented off when it comes to using designers for services, right? I would imagine you get tons of calls from people who might not know what you do and say, "Hey, can you just make me a logo?" And then you have to return with, "Well, I can, but that doesn't help you. That doesn't make a difference in your journey to get to be the best selling whatever. Instead, maybe let's talk about how this logo can be part of this theme, and then it kind of evolves into something bigger, better, and ultimately way more effective. But I feel like there's a huge problem when segmenting services in creative design. Do you find that a lot of people want to kind of part out all of those pieces and say, like, no, I only want to pay for X. I only want to work on Y. And how do you maybe not change their mind, but how do you show them that that might not be the best fit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been through that segmenting too. And that's forced me to, I think, create packages that I can offer as options. So if someone is, my whole thing is brand identity plus web design plus the positioning strategy part of it, which is a big component of helping me do a really good job on these projects. Sometimes they only want that positioning part. Sometimes they only want the fix on the copywriting. And I'm like, okay, let's start there. Let's get
Mm,
our relationship built as a foundation. We'll do that together. And I know once you go through that process, you're going to love the outcome we come up with. And it'll be more likely that you see the value in the other, you could say, segments of this, design kit that I'm about to offer. But overall, like I'm happy especially at this early stage and trying to get off the ground to offer options. If you want a website only, fine. We're happy to do that for you. But I'll walk you through sort of to your best benefit. I'll walk you through the right steps that we need to take to get there. Right.
mm,
And if, as an attachment to that, we feel like there needs to be some sort of soft reboot just to bring your logo into the year 2025, I'll do that for you. I'll go to that length because, like you said, like your logo doesn't matter as much as it's going to, change sort of the trajectory of your business. But it becomes sort of the face that you display everywhere. It can be a costly mistake, and it can be a very costly mistake when you're a huge business. When you're a smaller business, it can be a costly mistake that it's a sort of a brand debt, I like to call it. It's a form of debt
mm,
that you've taken on now to do something really cheap that you're going to have to pay off later on in the future, by losing some kind of brand value, brand equity piece that you're going to look back and say, oh, I wish I fixed this earlier because now I'm stuck with it.
hmm
So that type of feeling, is something that I very clearly see that they're going to go through that eventually, but they don't see that at that point. And sometimes it's really hard. I don't want to convince somebody to give me money who is not comfortable. And I don't want to convince them into a route where they feel that, oh, this is not the right time for this, and I'll get to it later. But what I want to do for them subtly is that I do want to take care of them. If I get to work on, that sort of a website only project, and I get it this opportunity to just maybe reboot their logo just a little bit and give them a new set of fonts, a new set of colors that will work well for the story that we're now trying to tell, I'll go to that length. I'll go to that length to set them up for success so that at least, years down the line, they don't feel like they're ripping off a band-aid, and they feel like, okay, that scar is healed and now I'm in a better place. And now from here I can pivot wherever I want to because the equity that I have is strong enough. And I'm willing to go to that extent. I hope that answered the question. I think that was a bit long-winded for me.
No, yeah, it was definitely awesome. There's a level of kinship and kindred feeling that I think I can at least say for myself, but I'm pretty sure Jeff feels the same way. Is when we see a problem, we just want to solve it. We just want
Yes.
to go full force into it and say, okay, this is how you're going to fix it. But you can't do that if the client doesn't want it. But subtly giving them hints saying, like, oh, it would be really beneficial to maybe have this, but it's up to you, whatever you want, or kind of leading them to water is uh, an invaluable tool in our cool toolkit. But yeah, I mean, just to say, I love this idea of brand debt because I think most people can equate it to the idea of, okay, yeah, you're gonna have to upgrade later, but it's more than that, right? Because it's not just upgrade, it's if you didn't go with a higher value solution earlier, how much did you give up in momentum to really take the cheap way out, right? And it's not to say that any cheap design is bad per se or bad to start with. But I think when you're looking at a difference of level of quality, especially when you're trying to reach kind of the upper echelon of consumers, if you have a very uh, like luxury focused or you're trying to reach people with a lot of money in their pockets, essentially, for a very expensive and not so critical product, you're really putting yourself in a bad position in terms of trying to rebuild that momentum because a fresh start doesn't mean that you take off like a rocket. It just means that now you have the capability to do so. You still have to put in the legwork, and if you're paying off that debt, it's not just a start from zero. It's a start from, well, I gave up X amount of follow through of momentum to get to here. So now I have to rebuild from that as well.
Yeah, I love that thought. I want to interject with something real quick there
Yeah,
to
certainly.
sum that up a little bit more. I love this idea of momentum that you introduce, and in my opinion, the way that we build momentum is not from like the big wins; it's actually from the small wins. It's still those everyday, consistent
Mm,
small wins. Now, let's relate that back to what a brand can do with a really well-built logo and identity. Um, Take Amazon, for example, right? So Amazon Prime will, we won't care about the whole e-commerce perspective for a second, or AWS. We'll care about the shipping and sort of the handling and the delivery trucks, right? So when
mm,
Amazon delivery trucks go around and they have that freaking smile, right? The A to Z smile. And that's the thing. That's their psychological trigger. That when you see that even throughout the roads, you're like, first of all, what I think when I cross the street, I'm like, did I order something today? It's like, why am I seeing this smile? And there's also this thing where no matter who you ask nowadays, when they see an Amazon box and that smile at their front doorstep and they bring that box in, they're excited. They're excited to
Ah,
unbox something,
that's
mhm.
true.
right? It's like an unboxing
Yeah.
experience in itself. Now compare that to, the plethora of delivery corporations, FedEx, UPS, United States Postal Service, right? Just three of them. You have DHL as well. You have whoever else you want to think of, right? All of them, you could say, are much more corporate, corporatized. FedEx goes
Right.
after sort of that purple, orange, sort of speed, rapid, that arrow between the E and the X, if you've ever seen it. That's something that they play on. UPS plays on the shield. Originally, their original logo, the retro one, actually had a little bit of like a gift wrapping on top. Eventually, they left that and they went just for that shield. So they go for like shield, trust,
Mm.
reinforcement. But if you ask the average person, all they're going to think of is that freaking Amazon smile because that became a psychological trigger that started building quick wins for Amazon day in, day out without them even doing anything. Okay. So it's a 24/7 salesman. If you have the right logo, if you have the right piece to attach to your brand, you are building brand equity. You are building quick wins day after day after day. And that is going to help you build momentum for that long term. And so at that point, it's as if, that was an investment and you got the interest off of that, right? You were paid interest instead of paying back all this brand debt later, you were actually paid back in interest. And eventually you had, a value of your brand and your company at dividends higher than you would have if you kept that debt going. So if Amazon only went with the word Amazon, maybe it wouldn't have been so successful because that's not the psychological trigger. Now, that's not a way to say that everyone needs to start including a smile into their brand. But if what it
Mhm.
really is you need to, wherever appropriate, right, whichever market you're in and it's appropriate for you, you need to have that sort of icon, that sort of logo that just, instantly reminds people of who you are. And the fact that they can see that every single day is a psychological trigger. And you need to use that tactic to your advantage and not underestimate it. And I think that's a perspective shift that I want to help the world introduce to. I want to help sort of the mainstream audiences figure out that design isn't just, making things look pretty. It's actually a psychological play if you play it right, if you play your cards right.
Oh,
Mm.
wow. So, what you're saying is that those choices that you can make at the beginning, if you do the right choices, they will create quick wins, which will compound over time. So
Exactly.
it's not just that you will have more, but with the compound, it will be exponentially more over time.
Exactly. Absolutely. If you take a look at something like right now on my screen, I have the Notion, that N block of Notion. If I analyze that real quick, okay, the N is for Notion. Whenever I see that N anywhere, I know that, yes, this is Notion. I love using Notion. It's great. But overall, if you look at what that icon looks like, it's like a building block. It's like one of those building blocks we used to use in preschool. And isn't that exactly what the product experience is like of Notion? Isn't that
Mm.
the story that I get to put all these blocks and pieces? If I want to create a page here randomly, I want to put a table on here, move things around as if like I were repositioning building blocks really, really quickly, like I was when I was a kid. Their
Mm.
whole aesthetic is around telling that story. Did they need to do that? Could they have just gone after like one little N? Boom, that's it. But they put that N, put that building block above it, and made it into a story. And that little touch point is now a story that tells you what you need to know. When you connect those dots with actually using a Notion product, it retains, it stays in here, and staying in here in the mind. For everyone not knowing, I'm pointing at my brain. If everyone staying, if you are able to take up a spot, even the smallest spot in a person's mind, you have grabbed attention and you have secured top of mind awareness. And people pay millions for things like that, and people spend millions and give advertisers a lot of that money to obtain that. But this is stuff you can do, and like you said, Jeffrey, compound those quick wins over time.
And this illustrates perfectly well what you said previously when you told us that a branding is a story. And here,
Yes,
everything is part of the story. And when everything clicks well together, that's when you get your the most power. I imagine that's where the if the story makes sense and is consistent, it clicks.
absolutely.
I think when we're looking at design and marketing in general, it's viewed through such a lens of importance for business because it relates to customers, but this is just kind of like a classic point of nature for art, right? Is that art is meant to convey a feeling, an emotion, a sense of interpretation, even. And it's so baffling to me that there are some people out there that question the value of creating strong branding because it involves an investment of money, right? I think if it was any other type of capital that you would have, if maybe you just brought in an intern or just had to spend a lot of time clicking buttons on a screen, I think it would be handily very easy to kind of justify that. But when you look at the cost of high level designers, of even amateurs on Fiverr now getting more expensive, that value is actually intrinsically an investment. It's not just a cost center. So we've been talking a lot about the business portion here and a lot about the or your business in general, but there's something really interesting that I kind of want to touch on here because you are also digging deep into this creation of brand, not just for businesses or not just for your clients or for your business, but for yourself. You are creating this kind of content creation that is rating brands, which I always thought was hilarious and very fun to watch in terms of getting an idea of your rating system. And it almost reminded me of kind of like a movie critic. And I just wanted to talk about it because it's something interesting that I don't see anyone else doing.
Yeah. It's the classic when everybody zigs, you have to zag. And that comes from another author. His name is Marty Neumeier. And so the thing there is, like you said, like nobody else is doing it. And that for me is like this really cool feeling. Like I have to grab it by my teeth and just eat it up. Like this is my chance. This is my opportunity. What I call it is a glow up meter. And the way that I present it is it's the Rotten Tomatoes for logos and branding. That's it. That's all you need to know about it. It's literally a one to 100% score rating of a newly released brand identity like Jaguar, like Kit Kat, like the Guggenheim Museum, which I all three of those are on the website. And I wanted to launch, for SEO purposes, for
Mm,
launching a blog for that purpose. Inherently, it's a business purpose. But the way that I package it, the way that I put an idea to it, the way that I challenge myself by saying, I don't want to just post any blog, any newsletter. I want whoever's going to land here, I want them to walk away with some new form of information, some new way of thinking. And this was my approach to doing it. And it combined sort of the best of both worlds in my hobby for passion for movies and storytelling and watching and experiencing that. I asked myself, how do I know which movie to invest my time into? So
mm,
there's this, I think, fun debate on like YouTube. A lot of productivity coaches and productivity gurus have posted videos on this. Is like, how many books have I read within 1 year? And they sort of challenge each other and they sort of put that number. I'll ask the equivalent question to that: how many movies do you watch in a year? And each single one of those movies is either a 2 to 3 hour commitment. And so, how do you know which one you're going to watch and which one you're not? You go to Rotten Tomatoes. And if it has, a score above 80%, then you're like, yeah, I have to check this out. If it's below like 60%, and you're like, this is rotten, this is crap, I don't want to spend time on it. Unless it was like free TV and I had nothing else to do, you know. Even going through Netflix, you're going to be like, oh, there's so much to choose from. Let me just pull up my phone and check the Rotten Tomatoes score and then choose that film. In the same
mm,
way, I want to ask the question, what brand should I invest my time and energy in? Should I invest my time and energy in a brand that doesn't care about their branding? Well, no, I don't
mm.
want to do that. I'm going to be that critical. I'm going to be that hawkish. Just like when I say that I don't want to watch a crap movie. Craven the Hunter came out this weekend. It made only like 11 million in its like front end first weekend, and it's going to be declared a flop because it had $110 million budget. Right? It's not going to be able to cover that. It's a flop. It's a
Mm.
crap movie. It got like 17% Rotten Tomatoes. Right away, I know I just saved like $40. I don't have to go buy tickets to the movie theater on top of paying for popcorn. In the same way, I don't want to invest my time and energy in you if your brand is not well rated. And so right now, it's sort of like a rating system that I'm doing it as solo author. Like I'm the only one rating it. I do want to eventually open this up and make this, sort of like a user base, just like Rotten Tomatoes has, a list of creative critics, a list of normal people, normal users that have watched this movie. They gave their audience score. I want to make something like that. But that's building that is it's going to take some time. But at least at this moment, I get to share my opinion and sort of be this key opinion leader in this field. And the way that I rate it is not just some abrupt number off the top of my head. It's actually It's about like seven different metrics that I grade on. Things like timelessness. Is this brand going to last a very long time, or is it just being too trendy? What is the evolution of this, from 0 to 5? What should I grade that? And so when I grade each of those metrics, I have an Excel that sort of calculates and turns that into sort of a weighted average score, which gives me above 80%. I call you a supernova. And the
Mm.
far end
Wow.
of that, if you're like below, like, what is it, like 40%? And this is very similar to like how we used to get graded in high school. If you're a complete fail, I call it cataclysmic, because what you have created, like Jaguar, is a cataclysmic brand identity for your business. And that is going to create cataclysmic results versus Supernova, which is going to create supernova results. Right. So I love this whole schematic of branding and putting motifs and themes behind it. It's very much like Rotten Tomatoes, and I enjoy writing it. And it's just a matter of just being more consistent, which I plan on doing in 2025. But it is a really, really fun side project.
It sounds so goofy on its face because yeah, okay. Why do you need a Rotten Tomatoes for branding? But
Yeah.
the more and more I think about it, maybe from a professional perspective, yeah, it gives you some insight into like, okay, what about this brand is so awesome or sucks, right? What about this new change influenced someone to say, I have to talk about it in XYZ, or using XYZ metrics? But on top of that, if I'm just a layman and I have no idea about anything regarding business or branding or anything like that, at the very least, I can see that score and think like, okay, someone like a professional thinks this kind of sucks, and maybe some people are agreeing with it. Maybe there's some controversy around it. I mean, something like the Jaguar rebranding. I think most people have given their 2 cents on it, but without knowing anything about business or branding, I can see that, okay, maybe a business that doesn't care about its own image, what does that say about their customer care, right? If you don't care enough to handle your own in-house business and do what's best for you, what makes me think that you're going to go out of your way for me?
Yeah.
And I think there's
Exactly.
there's a lot of correlation to the perception and reality, right? I think my mother was one of the biggest influences in my life, and something she constantly drilled into my head is that perception is more important than reality. And if you have a perceived brand that is not aligned with what you're trying to do and not presenting yourself in the best light possible, or at least making the attempt to, I don't think that business is going to do well, or in some cataclysmic cases, they might not stick around for that long. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah, there are a ton of different reasons why I think analyzing branding is important, but I can't help but say, like, I love the idea of putting a fun and goofy spin on something that's very serious, you know?
Yes.
And with that being said, complete aside, because I now have to know because you are into movies like that. What's your favorite movie?
Okay. Um, has to be Interstellar. Has to be
Okay,
Interstellar.
Oh,
okay. Give me 2 minutes on why.
Okay, great. So first minute I can spend entirely on Christopher Nolan only, and his ability to storytell in a non-linear way, I think is a really cool thing. I think I'm more of an ADHD mindset as well. And so for
100%.
me, it's like going at it and jumping from one point to the next to the next to the next. The way that he looks at time is like it's not this linear loop that like we keep living life as it is and keep moving forward. That it's, life can also be lived. At some moments you want to celebrate memories. At some moments you want to celebrate
Mm,
nostalgia. At some moments you want to work towards that, achieving that goal in the future. And I think the way that we live is like we time jump all the time, even though we can't do it in our, third dimensional bodies. But in the fourth dimension, we can do that. And the fourth dimension is time. The way that he looks at time, even in something like Inception, was incredible to
Batman.
see that.
Yeah.
Batman as well. Yes. So all of these things, but like Interstellar, they just had their IMAX re-release. I didn't get to watch it because I couldn't score theater tickets. Every single time I opened Fandango, it was completely sold out. So I don't know what
Rough.
happened there.
Yeah.
But Interstellar at the core is a story about love. It's a story about a
Mm,
father and a daughter's love for each other. And then at the grand scale, it's about saving humanity. But never for a moment did he make it seem like this grew out. The story kind of expanded from this like little house in the middle of the West, in the middle of the Western America, in the middle of like a farmland. Like the story always felt like it was compact, and we cared about every single one of these characters, and each character had an identity. And for me, all those moments where we had to just ask ourselves intellectually, what does love mean in the world of science? Right, was also a
mm,
big thematic in this. How do science and love, which should have no correlation because science is like the left brain, love is like the right brain, but them coming together, I think, is the ultimate ability of being a true human. And that's, I think, what Interstellar taught me is like, how can I just be a better person? How can I look towards being, a scientific mindset and having this sort of intelligence to help improve the world, but also come back to my home, come back to my family, and bring that sense of love and bring that sense of kinship for everyone around me. And I think that was my biggest callback. It's like connecting those two sides of the brain.
that's the perfect lens for what we're talking about because in a very logical sense, business should have nothing to do with inspiration, right? If you have a really, really good product, it shouldn't matter what your logo is. But it does because everyone has to have some kind of emotion attached to something that they care about, something that they use, something, I just today had a thought because a friend of mine wrote a children's book. And I know another friend of mine has a really young daughter. And I immediately thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to send it to them in Amazon. And that was my first. It wasn't like, oh, maybe I'll buy the book and then I'll go to FedEx and I'll have it. And of course, part of it is convenience. But I think the other side is that I associate gift giving and the idea of like, yeah, I'm going to get something nice for the people I care about with Amazon now. And it just happened because of a million different kind of emotional and tactical moves that Amazon made to put me in that mind space. So it's very cool that there is an entire kind of back end to this that we can start looking into and that people like yourself have built a business on and made a living on. It's incredible. So I guess ultimately what we do this show for is we want to get people inspired who might not know the technical detail of what you do, but might want to learn about it. So if there's someone out there who's really just peeking into the world of design and marketing and trying to figure out if that's what they want to do for the rest of their life, do they want to grow up to be a marketer, right? What would you tell that individual? How would you tell them to go from 0 to 1?
Yeah, that's an incredible question. Because I look back at maybe some of the mistakes I've made, some of the mishaps, and some of the things that went well. I think one of the biggest things you can do is create a very clear distinction between design and art. Art is something that you do for yourself. Design is what you have to do for the business. And inherently, you have to care about the client in front of you and helping them improve their business in some little way, because again, those quick wins matter. And so design and art are very different things. A lot in my beginning stages, I made the mistake of bringing too much art into my projects, into my pieces, because I had an inclination of like, okay, I saw this really cool way that this poster was designed by the NBA in some format, big bold fonts, big splash of colors. I want to bring that into my design today. But no, you can't do that. You have to be very thoughtful and be strategic about every little decision that you make. Now, after hours, if you want to experiment, create, concept posters, concept art, go ahead. It's a way to exercise your muscles. But when it comes to sort of designing for the client, it's very important to be very focused, be strategic, rely on the conversations that you've had with them, and think about where you can take them, and having that distinction is very important. I think the other thing as an advice I want to give is that design and sort of the marketing world are also very different. If you want to say that I'm going to go to college to study marketing, then that's very different than saying I'm going to college to study design. I'm a self-taught designer. I went to college to study marketing, but I never really loved any of those courses. I never really got into that. I just never understood it as sort of a hard skill that I wanted to develop, and I really wanted to develop a hard skill. One that I felt like I'm going to college and I'm walking away with, a set of tools that I can go into the world with. And so design was that for me. And I introduced myself to that. So during like break periods between classes, I would go to the library and I would just open up Photoshop, and I was paying for it with some of the scholarship money that I had. So I opened up Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, all of them, and I just, designed. I joined
Mm,
clubs at my school, two different clubs at the same time, leading creative director for both of them. Why? Because I wanted that experience. I wanted to be able to work on test projects that weren't like concept, because I always got tired of doing too much art and not enough business design work. So that
mm,
was my way of getting practice and like business design practice of working for free, but in between those hours working on that, coming up with something good, something that would help bring people to the events, right? Instead of just being like a very artistic piece, help bringing people to the events, and then looking at like, okay, how many people showed up? Do we think the posters helped? I would go to the library, printer, and print out like 50 pages of posters and then hang them out throughout my campus along with like other team members. And that was my way of learning marketing from a very early stage, from a very brutal, raw stage, not in the classroom. I don't think you can learn marketing that well in the classroom. I think you can learn it by having your own business. So if you're
mm,
going to go down the business and design route, just know that it is a very hard route. Because AI has entered the play, people are going to value design even less now. And what you're really going to have to focus on from the beginning is that narrative that you create, the story that you tell as a designer, the soft skills that you bring to the table, the ability to work with a client, sit down with them in discovery sessions, work through their problems, and help come up with a solution that will actually affect their business. That's where you'll actually feel like my design work is being valued. Otherwise, maybe another career is good for you, but it wouldn't be the first thing I would suggest, because I also think it really depends on a lot of natural talent. I think I had a lot of natural talent for seeing the way that colors work, the way that logos work in the world, that brought me to design and that made me love it as a career. So don't come into this thinking that, oh, I'm going to get this like huge big salary, even if it's like UX side, right? Um, never chase the money, chase the talent, chase the skill, chase the craft, and chase the feeling that you get when you work on these types of projects. That's what you really should be after, and the money will follow. I promise it
mm.
will follow once you get your name out there.
Awesome.
This is a very important piece, and it must have been a big moment when you realize that it's not just about doing cool art, it's not just about doing a cool design on Photoshop, but it's about thinking about the long term business success of the client. And you told about AI. I'm pretty sure AI can do the former pretty well, can do cool art, can do a cool design, but thinking about the long-term business benefit of the client company, I don't think AI can do that, at least not
Yeah.
for now. No, Gurjinder, I'd like to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests. So special 2 minutes. This time it will not be about a movie, but it will be about a
Sure.
different setting. I have 2 special minutes to share a message with everyone on Earth that is on Earth today, as well as everyone on Earth in the future generations. So you have these special mic that gives you access to everyone for 2 minutes. What do you say?
Wonderful. I'm ready to perform on this too. What I'll say to that to that question is it made me instantly think of what Steve Jobs once said about making a dent in the universe. Um, I think that's one of the greatest feelings, that if you really wanted to live forever, just know that you've left a legacy behind and that you've left a dent in the universe. That just by you being in the world and you being in a room right now means that you have this power and this sense of gravity, right? It goes back to Interstellar. Jeffrey, I'm going to take it back to the movie
Oh.
analogy. It goes back to Interstellar. Imagine yourself as like either you're just a regular person or you're like this supermassive black hole that is going to pull all this gravity towards you. And I think that's what some of the most famous people, some of the biggest legacy characters that we know are all about, is it's being able to shift reality around them and, put humanity towards a perspective, towards a track that they otherwise wouldn't have gone on without your unique intellect. I feel like every single person is an amalgamation, sort of like a cauldron of all these potions and experiences, memories, good, bad, pains, feelings, everything. You're a complete mixture of all that. And imagine you're taking a cauldron and stirring it, and you kind of create this concoction, and that's what you are. So every single one of us has, even just by the little measurement, the little difference in measurement of like one extra drop added here and there. Every one of us is different, and we're able and capable to bring something new to the table and a new perspective. It's just that once we realize that perspective, once we own up to it, and once we start projecting that into the world, and it's really easy to do that. Go on Twitter, go on LinkedIn, go anywhere else, go on TikTok, create a little short about it, but present your perspective, present your opinion to the world, and eventually, you can start putting a unique story to the table, and that story will start resonating with people, and that's when you start making a dent in the universe. Don't think that you have to choose a traditional career path just for the sake of it. Maybe in, some beginning years you study something like engineering and you go after that job and you make a lot of money. That's great. Eventually ask yourself the question, okay, what's next? What is that next thing I want to do? Now that I've solved sort of the money problem for a little bit, what is the next thing I want to do? What is the next thing I want to interact with? How else can I put a dent in the universe that actually means something, that actually going to be very long? It's going to last a long time. It's going to leave my legacy. If I want to be timeless as a person, as a character, I want to be able to leave my legacy. And it doesn't have to be that you're the next, like, founder of this amazing unicorn startup. It can just be you've made an impact to the people around you in your local community. And there's been infinite examples of that. But you just being able to live up to your truest authentic self, the real person that you are, living up to that concoction, that recipe that put you together, means that you've provided your service to the world. There's this thing in Hinduism, which I'm very religious like that as well. It's called karma, which is your duty and your responsibility. It's as if every person has landed on the earth to fulfill a duty, and without fulfilling that, you have not, fulfilled this lifetime. That you probably have to come back to the earth to live up to that goal one more time. And until you do that, until you sort of get that, you won't get salvation. You won't get to go into sort of the heavens in the way that you want to, and sort of that infinite, zone of peace and happiness. You have to bring sort of your dharma out here, and you have to live up to that duty and make sure that you put a dent in the universe in a good way, in a positive way. Yeah, that would be my sort of answer to that.
Beautiful. Even if it seems like that whatever the question we ask you, you always find a way to talk about Interstellar.
Yes, always. No matter what.
The idea of making
Nolan, every single time.
No, Nolan, if you're listening to this, he's your guy. Gurjinder's
I would
guy.
love to work with you. I would love to work with you.
Well, on that
let's
note,
make a dent into the universe with
Yes.
this podcast.
yeah,
Yes.
100%.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Woo!
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, people listening, all of our lovely listeners coming to hear all this awesome insight into the world of design, marketing, and apparently movies. Thank you so much for joining us. If you like this, like, subscribe, send it to a friend, maybe send it to Christopher Nolan, just real quick. And Gurjinder, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.